Okay, so the recording's on. So welcome everyone. It's lovely to see some names and some faces, and we did kind of set this fairly quickly. So it's great to see some people that are able to be here with us live tonight. And for those of you who are joining us with the recording, it's really nice that you're part of it in your own way as well. I'm going to encourage people to use the chat to pop any questions in there. Rylana's going to have a little look through those, and we'll try and perhaps answer a couple of questions at the end as well. So I'm going to share my screen. Sorry, I've got the mic under my arm now. So I'm like, I'm deploying a stretchy arm at this point. Yeah. Get it so I can share my slideshow. There we go. Wonderful. There you go. Hopefully, I can put my stretchy arm away for tonight. And so tonight we are coming together for the purpose of really considering what's happening in the community at the moment around people's well-being, some of the experiences they might be having, some of what we're all having access to in terms of some of the knowledge around what's happening in terms of the brumby culls. And I will introduce myself a little bit on the next slide, but I think you know by now my name's Dr. Kate Renshaw, and I'm actually a play therapist, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. But before I say any more about that, I did want to start by doing an acknowledgement of the original custodians of the lands here in Australia and in the world of children, and I think children can teach us a lot. I thought a child-based acknowledgement might be really nice and gentle for us tonight as well. And so we would say, hello land, hello sky. You can join in if you like. Hello self. We can give ourselves a hug, and hello to all of our friends here as well. And I think just even being able to acknowledge where you're coming in from today. So I'm here on Wadawurrung country in Ballarat, Victoria, and you might like to pop in the chat where you're connecting with us today. And I think really kind of knowing that there are people far and wide that are coming together today and are also going to be connecting into the recording as well. I think I've covered off the housekeeping that I had set out to do in terms of questions into the chat, and we'll have a little bit of time at the end on that. Cameras on if you want to be perhaps included in a recording that's going to be on a YouTube channel of Rylana's. And the only other thing I would say is be kind and gentle to yourself tonight. If you do need to step away for a couple of minutes, if something is really connecting to you and you need to step away and come back, please do. You can always connect back into the recording, or you might just need a few minutes. So please just, keep checking in with yourself as we kind of talk through things tonight as well. So, sorry. A little bit too far away from me with the mic in the way. I thought it would be useful just to introduce myself a little bit because I know Rylana and I might know others that are here tonight, but I won't know everyone that's here tonight. And I do have a little bit of a different background in terms of mental health and well-being. And although I do have a background in psychology studies, I actually work with children and families and am registered as a play therapist here in Australia. And that is a form of psychotherapy where we use toys and play to express ourselves. And so really thinking about the way as humans we might connect with expressive mediums, sing, dance, chat, sit around the fire, all of those really those really intuitive ways of us expressing ourselves. Children are so good at doing that, and that's the work that I do with children and families. And I've done that here in Australia and also in the UK. And as I was preparing for tonight, I didn't go down the rabbit hole, but some articles started to flash up in front of me about the Dartmoor ponies, who I also hold very dear in my heart, and my personal connection there that you'll see on the right. That I am a parent to a horse lover, and I am always keen to be part of her world and do anything, including picking up poop and cuddling ponies. And the first time she ever sat on a horse and rode a horse was actually a Dartmoor pony when we were living in England. And so seeing that there's also some potential threat elsewhere in the world as well, it did make my heart a little bit heavy, I have to say, this week. So the equine connection for me is also that I strangely have done a little bit of training in animal assisted play therapy. And I say strangely because I don't currently practice animal assisted therapy. However, I'm really interested. I've always been a huge animal lover, and I've always been really fascinated with the connection that we have with other sentient beings. So, beings that feel, beings that experience, and our relationship with them. And so I really have done some quite interesting learning with one of the leading world people in terms of horses and play therapy, which is Tracy Farr Thompson. Had the pleasure of learning from her, and that horse human bond that I think many of us pulls us here tonight. That's something, learning about that for me is deeply fascinating, and not just that emotional bond or that social bond, but also the clinical therapeutic relationship bond and the playfulness that we know horses have, and we also have as humans and mammals alongside horses. So there's some really special, factors there that I just wanted to highlight around, I suppose, where I'm coming to you tonight, and that I do primarily work with children and families. And when Rala and I were talking about tonight, I said I'm very happy to share my insights and from that perspective, and hopefully that might be a different perspective for some. It might resonate with some. It might help you kind of feel like there's already things that you're doing and you're on top of. And sometimes that can be really nice to feel like, yep, I'm trying that. Okay, that's good. I can do that. I can do a bit more of something else as well. So hopefully there'll be something for everyone. And even if it is a little takeaway, or even if it's just time spent together tonight, knowing that we are all here for the same reason, for our, great regard towards these beautiful animals that we love and really want to see spend time on this earth with us as well. So, let's see if I could get my clicker working, but clearly that's...
Oh, that was beautiful. Thank you so much. Thanks for taking us on with our bleeding hearts.
My pleasure.
Horses have paved the way for us, haven't they? They've made our roads. They've been beside our sides for thousands of years. So I'm
They
looking
sure have.
forward to finding out a little bit more about that horse-human connection.
Yeah, and it's funny you should say that. I was only having a bit of a read of one of my books. This is the Animal Assisted Play Therapy book that Tracy Farr Thompson co-authored, and there's some beautiful writing in there about that history of horses in the world, and how far that goes back, and how far our human horse connection goes back, and the various roles and the various ways we've been with horses on planet Earth. And so yeah, it does kind of, it's an interesting one to think about in that way. So yeah, that's a nice one to connect. Thanks, Rylana, and thanks for putting it together tonight and really thinking about this being an important thing for people out there in different parts of Australia to come together and spend a little bit of time online together. So, with that in mind, I think I did really want to start with this idea and a little bit of, validation for us as well around this idea that we you aren't overreacting if you're having strong emotions or responses to what is currently happening. That this connection that we do have between animals and horses in particular that we're talking about tonight, these are really genuine, what we would call attachment bonds and relationships that we do form with horses as humans. We may not have those with wild brumbies, but they have those with each other. And we have those with the horses that we have personal connection with. And we also notice that and observe that in the horses that we perhaps have connections with each other. And some of you will have, I know Rylana has a herd where she is, and seeing those interconnections and those family bonds or those friendship bonds or different relationships. And they are genuine relationships. And we know so much about these relationships now, both horse to horse and horse to human. And so the world of psychology and neuroscience has been doing a lot more in this space. And I think that is fascinating to learn about those things. So some of the things we've learned from human neuroscience, we have actually learned from mammals. So, and not just horses. So, rats and monkeys and lots of animals have paved the way for what we know about this very, very special bond. And this bond is socially really important for animals to survive. And so for us, we get a lot of nourishment from each other as humans, but we also get a lot of nourishment from the animals in our lives as well. And we want to protect those animals and care for them in the best way that we can. So, when we are thinking about horses, I think one of the interesting things for me, and I've said it just before, I really was surprised thinking about mammals in this sentient way. And this is something I learned a little bit about through my animal assisted training for therapies, in that we don't always say that out loud in society. And sometimes people ask me if I want the calamari, and I say I'm not eating a sentient being tonight. And they kind of look at me a bit strangely, but I'm not going to eat one of the most intelligent animals out there with my chips. And, I think us knowing that animals are deeply playful, and that horses are playful with each other, horses are playful with us, and that both of those things are incredibly special for us as humans as well. I think when we know these things and we experience these things deeply in ourselves, it can also increase our distress around seeing animals that are being harmed or even killed and losing their lives. So I think that first and foremost, knowing if we are having a response, and allowing ourselves to have that response, and some of this can help us make meaning about why we might be responding in the way we're responding. So one thing that I think is really interesting is the research around horses as co-regulators. Their nervous system and our nervous system, and this is the mammalian type of research that they've done, but for horses it's particularly powerful. And I think we have a lot of awe for horses in our lives when we've experienced that, the way that they attune to us and respond to us, and sometimes the way they soothe us, um, and also the way that can also be vice versa as well. And so that relationship, and I think that's at the core of how people are feeling and might be responding, that relationship is often what we are, is being activated for us in our response. And so when there is a threat to that type of bond that we maybe know so well, And this might feel like a threat to some of that bond for an animal that we deeply regard and respect and understand that they are very special animals. So that can have a neurological impact on us. Just even having that awareness, these things can hit hard for us. Some people may not see horses in that way, they may not understand the science of um, horses and mammals in that way, and so they may not experience it in the same way. So,
So I've got a quick question. Am I right to picture a little bit like Avatar, that movie, where everyone is just like connected with that web and we feel each other's.
I love that because I think there are a horse type being in that too, and there is also the flying creatures, and they actually connect together physically
That's
and bond. Um, and seeing some of the imagery that's created to help explain the horse heart, mind, human heart, mind, gut, body, all those axes that we're learning more about, that imagery, it is a little bit Avatar, isn't it? So, yeah, and in the simplest form, mammals in general, we have an ability to, um, one of the neuroscience concepts is called mind mindedness. So, if we see something doing an action and we're tuning into that action and we're thinking about that action, the same brain part for us lights up at the same time as the mammal doing that action. So we can really get neurologically attuned. Um,
wow.
Obviously, human to human, we see that really strong, but the research is out there as well around interspecies neurological, connections. And I think people that have high regard for certain animals. So there's a lot of people that work with dogs. There's even animal assisted people that work with cats, and lots of other animals. And I think that type of research is telling us even more and more about some of the gifts that we have for each other when we do try and observe and tune in and connect. And I think brumbies are a beautiful symbol of that because often people are being very respectful and observing and not intruding into their space physically when they're in those wild environments. And they are learning and in awe of them. Um, and often, the animals are quite curious of the people that are coming into their space as well. Um, I was reading something this week. I was seeing images, and I didn't know this at the time, but in COVID, apparently all around Australia, dolphins were leaving seaweed and sponges on the shore for the humans because they were missing us.
Oh my
And
goodness.
I hadn't heard that at the time, but they enjoy our company and they enjoy seeing us enjoying them and being in awe and marveling over them. So there is a lot of reciprocal um, regard and connection interspecies. And I think sometimes we don't hear a lot about that out there in the world. And so, I think people that are very connected to animals, I think we feel that and we know that. And that's why some of these things can feel so strong for us as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was beautiful. The dolphins really warmed my heart seeing photos of them with the little piles of sponges this week.
Oh my goodness. It is also heavy because I think what I've felt out from the social media posts, what is so difficult to take is obviously the unnecessary cruelty.
Yes.
Then that's the obvious part. We've done that one, over and over, where people are just, trying to voice their pain over that. And then there is also a feeling of abandonment from, despite making ourselves heard and
Mm,
saying we've got better solutions, and just an abandonment from the people that are leading us. I think that's also very difficult.
Yes.
And
Yes.
yeah, and there's also been some labeling or marginalizing us to just paint us as these crazy, extremists,
Mm.
when we're really just asking for a simple thing, and that simple thing being just not cruelly removing them. So
Yes.
that's sort of what I felt out from many social media posts, that's where all, the pain is, and
Yeah.
everyone's just been really trying to express their pain in whatever way they can.
Yes. And as humans, we're not always very good at expressing our pain. So sometimes it might come out messy or it might come out in a way we don't want it to come out. And thinking about ways each of us can find ways that work for us. Sometimes it takes going through something that's really distressing to find ways that feel more comfortable or less messy, and being able to give ourselves the opportunity to express some of it rather than hold it in and it come out in ways that perhaps are a little bit unexpected too. And I think what you're talking about there, it really makes me think of that idea in number 3 here about this being a really unfathomable situation. That's a hard word to say. um, but it's really hard to comprehend. And I think it almost reminds me of, and I've done research alongside some other researchers of war torn, conflict zones, and refugee and asylum centres for children in those spaces. And some of that is so hard to imagine, um, humans and animals in those spaces around the world being in such unsafe and potentially life threatening or life limiting situations. It's hard to for us to even imagine it sometimes. And I think, this does feel very much like what we're talking about here for the Brumbies. It feels like a really unsafe environment that we maybe don't have much control over, that we maybe don't feel we have the support of people that might be able to address this and solve this problem and bring peace to the high country. And so there are parallels, I think, with some of the other things that have been experienced in the world, or people might be still experiencing them currently, because there is still a lot of conflict around the world at the moment. So these are normal responses to really hard to imagine and just so distressing to even try and think about these situations. So I think it is important for us to really know that we may it's not essential that we describe or justify some of our distress. It's okay to experience it. And we'll talk a little bit more later about, if you are feeling very distressed, some of the things you could do to support, ensure you're getting the supports you need as well.
Yeah, that's definitely always important that you do reach out in whatever way that you can. And obviously, that needs to be covered and addressed as well.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know if anyone feels like they have been told, or it's been implied to them that actually, that, what you're experiencing, your distress or your grief or your sense of loss or disempowerment isn't, appropriate or is over the top. Um, and I think, hopefully by what we've just talked through, you'll start to kind of perhaps feel or know a little bit that it's really not. And it's sometimes it's even more upsetting for us as humans when we're being told not to feel something that we genuinely know we're experiencing. And I think tonight, I suppose, is that a place to perhaps have that acknowledged by others here, just the presence of everyone here, knowing that the distress you're feeling is okay, it is proportionate. This is a very um, big, unusual situation there's lots of different types of grief and loss. And I think there's one called ambiguous loss, which is where it's really hard to define. And I almost wonder if for many people that's the type of grief and loss that you might be experiencing, and that can actually be really hard because it's not always recognized as a type of grief or loss.
I don't know. I think you defined it really, really well in that first part, that
Okay,
we
cool.
are connected with these beings because we know them, we've worked with them, we've loved them all our lives, and we know them so well. It's like, you know, that someone is out there, hurting our loved ones because of that connection. So yeah, but
Absolutely.
that's yeah, that hasn't got a category just yet, has it? We might
No,
have to make one.
maybe not a formal one, and that's sometimes the ambiguous loss. Some of the research from that comes from children that are often they might have a really big grief response to moving schools or a mouse that's a pet dying, and the adults in their life might think it's a exaggerated response. And so, ambiguous loss, I think the reason it made me think of that is I think it describes that very well, and that's often where we talk about ambiguous loss, where it might not make sense to others, but to you and to us, it makes sense. And I suppose that's the main thing here in this group tonight.
Absolutely.
So, I think a couple of the concepts out there in the psychological sciences that might help also at a conscious or cognitive level in our minds, because as humans we like to think about things a lot, and that does make us a little bit different to many other mammals. Um, and I didn't say this before, but I might read this quote out before we have a little look at these three things here. Because I had it written down and I've kind of skipped over it. But from the book I showed you earlier from Risa Van Fleet in the US, who's a very canine expert in therapies, and Tracy Farr Thompson, who's a very equine expert in animal assisted therapies, this quote says, like all mammals other than humans, horses live primarily in the here and now. They don't bear grudges and are not capable of presenting a false self. This means that each interaction with a horse is authentic and genuine. And I think that's a big difference. They live in that here and now. We have our big cortical brain. We have lots of extra thoughts that happen. We don't have that benefit. We benefit from connecting to them in that way because they help us be in the here and now. And you might have horses and animals in your life that you can be supported by as well, by being in that here and now with them. But some of the ways that we are a bit of a disadvantage as humans is our our brain does do a lot of cognitive thinking. And when we do that, some of these things that are on the screen here can happen. So the first one is, and some of you may have heard of some of these terms before, but I think it helps explain a little bit about some of the feelings out there in the community. The first one is moral injury, which I think is a really interesting one. And they talk a little bit about this in terms of it could even be nurses or hospital staff or even educators that are asked to do things that morally they don't agree with. And so, any people in workplaces, this might happen to, and that's where a lot of this research has come from. But I think it's really interesting because when we think about how that relates to other parts of our lives, when we see things happening out in the world that we feel really is gives us a sense of almost dissonance or deep discomfort with our morals and the way we see the world, um, then it moves us from feeling sadness towards something. It can actually really go deeper than that. It can really hurt us at a values level. And I think some of the things you were talking about, Rylana, just before, I think that is a really good example of a values level where we perhaps have a value of life other than human life as also being important. We have a value that society, part of societal functions, is also to look out for and protect humans, animals, the environment, the world. And when some of those things aren't done, or where there's a lack of protection, that can really cause us to have almost that moral sense of injury or hurt. And some of the anger or some of the really big emotions people might be experiencing could come from this place of feeling really injured deeply in our hearts and selves. Um, and I think people that have really been very active in advocacy and have worked really hard or have consistently tried to, support different causes over the years in regards to, for example, the brumby culling, I think this can be particularly hurtful and frustrating and weigh very heavy on those individuals as well. So I think,
Kate, that's a really interesting subject because in the horse world, we have been really seeing some changes coming through now. So, when you're saying that advocating for the benefit of having keeping our horses healthier, training them in more better ways, and trying really hard to do the right thing so they are happy, living and working for us, being ridden, used by us. So we've come such a long way there, and
yes,
it really clashes, doesn't it?
it does. And your words remind me of there's an educator from the US called Maya. I always forget her last name. Um, it'll come to me. Anyway, Maya is her first name. And she says, when we know better, we do better. And I think that's a really good example, as you said, that evolution in the horse world of this, the research that's happening around horses being deeply feeling and experiencing and their mental health and well-being, and the way we interact with them and form relationships with them and work with them or play with them and enjoy them, um, when that comes in contrast to what's happening at the moment to the wild horses that are so, um, you know, beloved and majestic and part of, the fabric of culture, then that is very at odds with how far we have come in the horse world.
Yeah, specifically in Australia, where we are certainly up in the top 10 when it comes to research, when it comes to equine health. Like Australia has really been up
Yeah,
there with scientific discoveries. Obviously, a lot of it is driven by the racing industry, but we hold our own with that sort of science. So,
definitely.
yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that moral injury component can unlock something in us. And uh, it leads us to the next one, which is this may not be the first time. And I think this isn't the first time. And I was only saying to Rylana that my daughter had done a research project on some of the Brumby culls that were years ago. And she was so passionate about learning about different ways of considering this in an Australian context. And that was probably 5 years ago. And we think about all the different culls or calls for the, protection, or how we can actually resolve this in a more humane isn't the right word because that's about us humans, but a more respectful and caring way. We'll use the word humane because it's the best one I've got. And I think when this happens over and over and over again, then this becomes something that builds up for us as well. So this might not be the first time this community has felt unsupported or unheard or made to feel like what you're experiencing is too much, or disproportionate to the events. Our bodies and our minds and even our thoughts. As I said, this takes me back, even just thinking about cumulative harm takes me back to the learnings that I was privy to through that research project, and some of it really blew my mind. Um, and so, our body may not always, and our mind may not always go back and have a good full reset. Sometimes our stress responses continue to build. And it depends what we've done in between different events we might experience. Um, if we've connected and had some psychological supports, um, we may have been able to do a little bit of healing and processing. But that's not always the case, and we might not even realize that it's starting to build up in us. And so that accumulation can also sneak up on us as well. And I think that's worth us being aware of, that is, a phenomenon that is more researched than ever before, cumulative harm. The next one is compassion fatigue. And this is where, for some of you who might be people that have been doing a lot of advocacy, I myself have been doing a lot of advocacy in childhood policy spaces over the last 24 months. And so, as I say that about people that might be here tonight in the brumby advocacy space, my heart is kind of strongly connecting with you in this moment too, around the amount of effort and work and thinking and strategy that people may have put that energy into trying to be advocates for brumbies who don't have words like humans. And so we know that when interspecies don't have the same words as us, sometimes their communication isn't as powerful, and we often step in and are those advocates. But those events, as we advocate, or as we might even, there could be people here tonight who have gone in and done rescuing, or have done been a refuge, done rehabilitation work, done therapeutic work with some of the brumbies that may have experienced trauma. We know horses can become traumatized from events that they experience. So that deep caring that some of you may have put into this particular part of, for some people, work or volunteer work, or your time, that does come at a bit of a cost over time. And that can come at a physiological cost. So that can actually make us worn down in a way. We can physically become fatigued and drained from that type of really passionate caregiving work. And again, a lot of this research comes out from workers that are caregivers, that are very passionate, say nurses or doctors that are very passionate about caring for people, or even, psychological
Mums.
helpers. Mums can have compassion fatigue, definitely. When we put our heart and our soul into something and we care so much about it, we can actually also experience burnout and distress. And it can mean that it becomes a hard burden to carry. And we may start to feel even resentment towards some of the roles that we're taking on, because the burden is so heavy. And so I thought that was worth mentioning tonight too, because there may be people that could be experiencing some of that too, because of that. This isn't the first time we have had brumby culls in Australia. It does cut us very deeply, and over time it can actually be quite tiring as well.
And I guess it's not just the Brumbies when you're talking about that cumulative effect and the compassion fatigue in the same time, that most of us have given care in whatever way. Most of us have been mums. We're horse mums, we're dog mums.
Yep.
We care about, we're passionate about trying to make a difference. And when there is something this large and we really all have tried. We've all written, signed petitions, and written, and it nothing get like it's absolutely exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that is a real phenomenon. I think sometimes knowing these things are real and what we might be experiencing is actually something that can be experienced. I think sometimes that recognition can be really helpful for us, actually also giving ourselves permission um, to rest or to seek support as well. And we are going to get to a few of those ways we can do that. So we'll keep moving along. I can talk for a long period of time, so we won't won't.
I'm not going to be helpful in that respect. So you've just got to keep me moving on.
So some of you may have started doing some learning around nervous systems, and I think more than ever before, I think our the neuroscience in the last 10 years has got a lot of people interested in our nervous system. For me, our nervous system is always in action, usually with other humans or other animals as well. Humans don't do very well in solitary confinement. We know this from research. So, nervous systems are usually always within and near relationships too. And I think that's worth saying. We don't just have a nervous system, we have a nervous system that is very social and emotional and also connecting as well. But what we know from a lot of the nervous system research is we there are some tools that we can use to help us to not overwhelm our body and mind, and also perhaps therefore overwhelm us in relationships and our social situations too. And, I think we know that the research does say so many useful things. Sometimes it's hard to hear these things, but when we do expose ourselves to distressing events, and this can be the news, this can be social media, this can be talking about it frequently, this can be viewing images. The research on this is really clear. We are actually, our nervous systems don't know the difference between watching this on the news and being there on the ground physically experiencing it. So every time we do those
Oh,
things,
wow.
yeah. And children's nervous systems are even more sensitive. So they're really, if they're watching, say, a movie with a war scene, their body's experiencing it like they're
Yeah.
in the war. So it's the same for us. So when we think about our exposure to things, it's very real byproduct that we may increase our experience of things like anxiety or depressive symptoms, because we don't have a lot of control over making those events stop. And they're still out there in the media and we're still continuing to see them. So we don't have that agency really to prevent it or stop it. And so that can then affect us in different ways. And so, one of the best things we can do, so research tells us that the news is actually quite bad for our health, which is an interesting one. Um, but we still tend to dip into it. But thinking about the ways you are dipping into it and having control over that can increase our agency, and our agency can then help us not go into that just exposure cycle for prolonged periods of time. And I think that's a really important thing for us to think about. So there's two concepts that I thought would be useful to talk about. And one of them is called titration, where we think about when we're having a little dose of something and we might have a bit more of a dose, instead of having like a huge dose or never stopping what we're drinking, we're kind of having little sips of something. And that's called titration. So we're titrating our exposure, we're limiting it, and then we're letting ourselves have a little bit of it here and there. And the different types of media can help as well. So when I read all the research around neuroscience and the news, the video type of news where we watch it and it's like we're seeing it and we're there, that's actually the most, it's having the biggest dose. Okay. We're having the biggest gulp of something if we're actually watching a video. Um, uh, Photos are probably one after that. Hearing people talk about something, narrative, audio experiences would probably be on par with the photos. And then print, so reading about it is probably one titration less. So it's probably more of a sip.
Yeah.
And talking about it in a social setting is probably on par with reading about it as well. So we can think about our dosages and think, well, if I want to be across the news and I don't want to miss out, how can I decide and have some control over when I'm checking in, how often I'm checking in, what method I'm choosing? Am I having a little sip? Am I having a big gulp, but that's all I'm going to have for the day? So that's us
Yeah.
titrating our exposure as well.
Yeah,
Trusted
Melissa just
sources.
said,
Yeah.
sorry, Melissa just said, she asked them to cover the video. So, yeah, it's definitely true to have a really good think about how you're going to absorb the news if you need to go and see the news, how you're going to, where you're going to get your information. So maybe you've got a few people that, you've already picked out that, are telling you what's going on, and then maybe really choosing the written information over photos and over the audio. And
Mm.
that can be really tricky because it just floods in, right? But you can make those conscious decisions, but you do have to make them. You have to go in there with a plan. Yeah. So, guys, go if you're really affected, don't just open social media and just let it flood you away. Like, go in with a little bit of a plan, and especially, well, we're going to see footage coming out, I'm imagining. So be careful. It's,
Yeah.
there's going to be quite a bit of triggering visual stuff and recent visual stuff that, is going to potentially hit the Facebook, Instagram sort of scene. So be careful. And these are fantastic tips.
Yeah. And a lot of it, I always say this when I work with parents, often when I'm giving them ways of, for playing and relational connection with children, I always say, none of these things sound like rocket science, but there's lots of little things that we can do or lots of little things that we can understand that they come together and they can make a big difference. And so hopefully a lot of things are within our reach that we can try things. And I think one of the biggest things is like trusted sources can be really helpful. And I think what you were saying there, Rylana, around, choosing when you do it and how you do it gives you a little bit more control. I know myself, I did a little Google the other day of this topic. And then I just had a look down at the list to see what news sources and which ones had pictures, like a small tile. And I was like, oh, I don't want to click on that one. And so I clicked on another one and then I was able to read like a factual article. And so even doing that, taking the time, because social media, it can be just right there on our fingertips. But if we take a step back and we've got a little bit more control over how we're accessing it, it can actually be very different experience for our bodies and our minds, and it can be a really powerful way of us taking care of ourselves. Because the world of social media, I think, is definitely wanting to expose us to as much as they can with everything. So we do have to be mindful of that. And this leads me to the next one, which I love a lot, which is called reciprocal inhibition. And this is where we kind of can't always hold distress and enjoyment at the same time, or calm. And so if we're feeling that titration, if we're reaching some of our limits, that can also give us our signal of we actually may need more of the enjoyable stuff. So my example, I work in a school 1 day a week, and I was saying in the staff room this week, I've been watching a lot of crocheted frogs being animated this week because I feel like I need that in my life. I need more joy. I need to watch like fun
I think
things.
I need more. I think I need some
I need
crocheted animated
I
frogs
need
too.
I need more crochet frogs this week. And that's kind of my metaphor for the things that um might help with my rebalancing. We can pair different things together. So if we're watching, say if we have decided to watch the news, we might have a tool with us to try and go, and I'll just, going to do some deep breaths while I'm watching this. And that can actually physiologically help us rebalance in the moment. It's not going to cancel out because we can only really feel one or the other. Or we might go, okay, I've reached my exposure. I'm going to turn that off and I'm going to listen to the wise words of Dr. Kate, and I'm going to get my bubbles out, and I'm just going to I've seen these viral things of people going for a bubble break instead of a smoke break, and they're leaning against the wall.
Fabulous. That
So
is
our
fabulous.
stress we can actually release it through our mouths. And not only does it feel good to release it like that, but we're also sparking a little bit of joy through bubbles as well. Bubbles bring us awe in the moment. And you'll probably attract some friends if you do that randomly in public, which sometimes I do. Um, so when we kind of know we can pair positive or enjoyable things together or counterbalance some of the distressing things with enjoyable things, it might be connecting with someone that makes you laugh, or sending a funny reel to someone in the hope that they're going to send you a funny one back. So we can really think about how we do this reciprocal inhibition and know that it is a tool. We can do something soothing or enjoyable before we dip into content, maybe during, to counterbalance it as much as we can, and after. So finding the things that spark joy for you. It's a bit of a life Marie Kondo. What makes you laugh? What makes you lose sense of time? What would you choose to do? And it might be, might be some time with the horses, or it could be having one of your cats and having playtime with them. Whatever it is, you know, make sure you're thinking about some of the things that bring you joy. Joy is not avoidance. Joy is helping you in your body regulate and soothe your nervous system. Children are very wise. They know this. And if you've ever seen a child have a distressing experience, usually they're trying to play. And in war, you see children playing in the rubble of war because children are very wise and they know how to tap into joy and soothing through those powers
So
of
it's
play.
you're saying it's not dissociation from the happening. It is actually a way of not sinking down with
Yes,
the torrent of bad feelings.
yes,
It's like it's a life-saving boat. It's
it
like a
is.
little life raft.
It is. It could even be just like a personal flotation device. It could be a small something. And I think we know when it becomes disassociation. And usually you're not enjoying it. And usually you're not in a flow state or losing track of time in an enjoyable way. You might lose track of time because you've zoned out. So I think knowing the differences for yourself and knowing that, it's very hard to zone out when you're actively doing something like blowing bubbles, or you might have moments, you might be brushing a horse and you might have moments where you kind of daydream, and that could be some gentle soothing disassociation vibes, but it's still active and you're a participant and you are probably connecting and feeling joy. But I think being aware of, if you think you are going into that zoning out where it's not enjoyable, or you're frozen or not as moving in your zoning out, I think that can give us some clues as well. Yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yep. So when we're playing, play is the opposite of depression. So think about, as an adult, we often don't always feel like we can name up the different ways that we play. But I suspect some of you might say, I'm going to go play with my ponies, or I'm going to go play with my puppies, or I'm going to go play. You might have children at home. They're great because if you get on the floor with children and play, they take us straight out of that place that can be really hard, and they take us straight into play. They might get out a magic wand and turn you into a frog if you're lucky. So, being mindful of how we titrate our exposure and being thinking about pairing it, like pairing something with a nice wine. I'm going to pair my cheese and my wine. So, the wine might be, I've got to use that in moderation, but the cheese, maybe I can have, some nice cheese and that makes me feel good. So, thinking about how we connect those together for ourselves as well.
Uh-oh.
Which which brings us to there are lots of different humans out there in the world who have had lots of different experiences in life. And some of those people that we might connect with, or we might work with, or we might have in our friends and family circle, they may have different experiences and views and opinions to us as well. And often, when we're feeling energized and we're feeling good in ourselves, and life is, ticking along, often we can navigate that quite smoothly. We can maybe giggle it off or, go, yeah, yeah, I don't agree with that. That's okay. But I think when we're experiencing some of the things we talked about just before, in terms of we might be having to work really hard to regulate ourselves and our nervous system and soothe ourselves and not be taking on additional stress, we might be feeling quite deeply hurt by events that are happening in the world. That then becomes harder to navigate some of that pushback that we may hear or experience from others. Um, and I think, first and foremost, we can also have a little boundary for ourselves and, give ourselves permission to say, actually, it's also okay for me not to respond or not to debate or not to try and justify anything to anyone right now. It's actually okay. I can give myself that if that's what I need. I think one thing I've learned more recently is, as humans who care about others and other humans and other animals, we're not always the best at boundaries ourselves, and particularly boundaries for ourselves that take care of ourselves. So I'm just going to name that up, because I think us knowing that we can put that in place and give ourselves permission to just not respond, or be able to, agree to disagree, or leave it for another time, that's also okay. But I think a few things here that might be useful as well, just to think through in your own personal scenarios that you might have experienced this already. You might kind of think, how do I know the difference between someone I need to just put a boundary and I don't even want to go there, or someone that might be genuinely curious? And people that might genuinely want to talk with you about this or be really curious are quite different, usually, in the way they're connecting with you and responding to you. And so knowing what it might look like and feel like for someone to actively be curious with you or actively be more provocative. They might feel like they're poking you a little bit or trying to activate emotions for you. And I think us knowing the difference, that helps us go, am I going to respond to this, or am I not going to respond to this? And this might be in person, or this might be in social media too. And I think that's a really tricky one, because sometimes it feels really hard not to respond. But that can actually be really helpful for ourselves. When we're thinking about that, compassion fatigue that we talked about earlier, knowing that we also will benefit from protecting our own energy, unfortunately, and this really pains me every day, our energy is not infinite. Which is really annoying. I don't know if anyone else finds that annoying.
Right.
I find that really frustrating. But it means that we have to know our own energy reserves and we have to be able to pace ourselves and care for ourselves, particularly if we're caregivers for others. That might be caregivers for animals, that might be caregivers for other humans, that might be caregivers in our workplace. So, when we're aware of this cumulative harm that could be building up for us, we might also then need to be able to go, actually, I don't even have the energy reserves at the moment, and I need to take care of myself. And that's a really good boundary to have. So,
Yeah, I'm the sort of person that sometimes I go in and I'll fight the whole world and
mm,
I'll tell them all how it is. And then a few hours later, I go, oh, God's sake, because then I get all the responses and then I don't want to deal with that anymore. What's with that? How can I regulate that a little bit
well,
better?
I think part of that is that passionate response and almost that advocacy for something you really believe in. And at the time, you might have the agency and the energy for it. But then you might realize pretty soon after that that might have your energy might have gone into that, and now there's nothing left in the tank for any other response. And
Yeah, so I've got to pace it,
pacing, yes.
use it more wisely.
Use it wisely. Think about my analogy for this when I work in big systems like education systems is, am I throwing a pebble into a pond and the ripples are going to make an impact, or am I throwing a pebble into an ocean?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
is my energy going to
worth
do
it.
anything to that ocean, or is it just going to laugh at my pebble?
Yes.
Usually laugh at my pebble and then I having a nap. But when we go, oh, this feels like a pond, it feels like there could be some shifting here, or people might be curious, or I feel like maybe I need to do something advocacy, but then put a boundary in place myself. That's enough. Now I can pace and restore myself too.
Yeah, so and if you do, it's always the good old saying of respond, don't react. So taking that breath, taking that moment,
I was going to say, get the
like
bubbles out.
rereading your response before you press send, or like just if you're in the room with someone, just like find a bit of quiet space where you can take a breath and regulate your emotions to the point where you can at least respond
Yes.
and not react and not feel, because we feel so much already, so it's very easy to tip us over the edge.
Yep.
And and then go into those useful phrases and just like almost responding like a computer if you don't have the capacity to like
Could be a good use of AI as
engage,
well.
right?
AI might assist you with your responses in terms of being able to say, I'm feeling really overwhelmed at the moment, and this is what someone's said to me, and I want to put a bit of a boundary in place, or I want to kind of give them the message of this isn't something I'm willing to get into or debate. And I'm sure you would get some interesting ones that you could personalize as well. So, speaking of useful phrases, being able to think about, what you might say, and there's a few there, I mean, even being able to say, I care so much about this that I'm not able to have a debate about it. This is just something at the
Yeah.
moment that I'm really caring deeply about. Some of those things might feel comfortable for you to say, or you might think, no, actually, that's not me. I need to kind of think about a way I could say something that, I'm just not up for talking about this today. Um, and that those useful phrases, I like to think about them as little tools that we can have in our pocket. If we think about ones or say ones out loud or practice saying ones, I'm sure our horses, I know my animals, my dogs and my cats and my chickens love hearing me practice things on them. Um, when I need them, they're more of a tool. I feel like it's not me trying to create a tool on the spot. I'm going, this one feels comfortable. I can say, actually, I don't have the time to get into that with you today.
Yeah.
So
So Maurice just asked, who do you think I'm putting? Oh, she's asked, she's been taking shots that advocates take shots at me for putting in an injunction. Who do you? I think I'm putting in an expert submission. Also, they're like challenging her. Who do you think you are? And they say in reply to her, well, we've already done this over and over. Why do you think it will work this time? How can you respond to this productively?
Yeah, I think that's a great example of, wow, that's big, right? And I think, I'm trying to think of it for myself, and think how I might respond to that, because I think that's what is the question really. What are some options? And I suppose being able to say, for me, it's really important to be able to hold hope and feel like I'm supporting what's happening, that I am willing to keep contributing to this inquiry or to whatever. To be honest, I think some of the inquiries happening at the moment in health and disability would probably like me to stop submitting things, but um, you know, that's not going to be happening.
Yeah,
So, that whole idea of, actually, for me, this is really important. And I really believe that these submissions over time continue to give the message that actually this isn't okay. And for any of you that are following what's happening in the NDIS at the moment, there's something very similar happened recently, where I think the government thought they could just quietly push something through, 2 weeks notice to respond to a new change in the bill. And the community put in 4,500 submissions. And I put a submission into that. And if someone had said to me, why are you even bothering? That would have been my response, that I genuinely feel that this is something I can support with, and that our voices matter, and that I will keep advocating in ways that are, the channels for communicating this, as long as I need to.
yeah,
I feel like there's, you know, advocates are very strong willed, aren't we?
yeah. If we
Some,
believe in something is worth advocating for,
yep, yep,
and especially also because there is always new science, new studies coming out to support our claims, and we are
absolutely.
absolutely willing to, find out about these new ideas and new findings that, because we're all evolving and nothing should just stay how it is.
Yep, yep. Hopefully that helps. I don't know if I answered the question, but I tried to put a few responses there that I would give. um, Lastly, in terms of our family and friends, I think this can be the most sensitive, because, and I'm really hopeful that all of you have someone in your life, even if that is an animal, that you feel you can just be honest with and be yourself with, um, and, not have to talk about things or justify things. It can be really hard when we have very close loved ones that may feel very differently to us on some of these topics. And I think perhaps being able to put that boundary in place, that won't be, if this is a long-standing disagreement, that, you may have people in your life that feel very opposite to you on some of these topics, that this isn't perhaps the time that it's going to be resolved. And you being able to put a boundary in place around, perhaps, I'm not in a position to try and resolve our differences around how we feel about this, but this is what I need to focus on, or need to take care of myself at the moment, or need to prioritize.
And I
I
like that because it creates your own boundary as well. You're
Yeah,
not there trying to convince your family member, friend, whatever, with all you got, because that's when you have people turn away from you as well, isn't it? Because they
yeah,
just go, oh God, here she comes again. That's not for you. That's not your war to convince the people around you. You have convinced thousands of people. You've got thousands. You've got literally an army behind you that think exactly the same way and
yeah,
feel exactly the same way. You go and find people to have a chat. Like if someone speaks to you in any way on the chat group, just strike up a private conversation, and like you can talk, because we all need an outlet. We all need to talk about this somewhere. And if your family, friends, work people, they're not the ones for you to convince. In the same time, they shouldn't also be annoying you or triggering you or any of those kind of things. So putting that real taboo, this is not something I want to discuss, talk about, or hear about. That's a really good way of protecting yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think finding those people that you feel you can talk about it with or communicate with. And, I'm sure many of you have people that are quite close contacts online or even in the social media sphere where you can message each other and you do feel like, you are perhaps part of a tribe together. We have lots of tribes in life, I think. Um, and finding people that we resonate with when we need that support and around a topic, and putting boundaries in place if we know it's not going to be useful to seek support in some parts of our life. At the moment, in the moment of these things happening, that won't be the time you're going to probably resolve that. And I don't think. I think that could be very challenging.
Yeah, and also just quickly, when you have probably a lot of horsey friends that might not really be feeling it like you do, and you're wondering how they could not be feeling it. Well, I guess maybe they're just protecting themselves and they're just blocking it out, and it looks like they don't care, but they're not ready for this sort of pain and they can't let it in. So everyone's different, and don't let it break friendships with good people if they're not out there fighting with all they've got. It doesn't mean that they're bad people.
Yeah, that's a really lovely point. And it might not be something that they, as you said, can navigate themselves at the moment, either consciously or unconsciously. Our bodies and minds do whatever we need to take care of ourselves sometimes. And on that note, how can we actually help ourselves a little bit too? None of these things are new, funnily enough, because we've talked about all of these tonight. But I think the way we frame these for ourselves in our mind and in the way we think about it and talk about it to ourselves and others is also important, because some of you may know or have experienced this yourself from other grief or loss in your life, that sometimes in those depths of despair, it can almost feel like a betrayal to be happy and to experience joy. Um, and so I want to name that up for everyone, that joy in these moments isn't a betrayal. It is actually a protective factor. It is a healing balm. It is a shield. It is all of those things that can help us and our well-being weather through adversity. There's research around this for us humans. So we know there are adverse experiences in life. They've been defined, and the impacts of them on our health and well-being are very clear in the literature. But we also know there are something called positive experiences. So adverse experiences and positive experiences. And positive experiences can heal us at a cellular level. They can heal us in terms of our well-being. They can guard against the impacts of future adversity, so they help us become more resilient. So, neurologically, joy and playfulness and social connection, they are very, very protective for us as humans. Um, and some of you may have read different, biographies or people that have experienced very, um, the depths of human suffering. I know I've read different accounts of people that have been, um, for example, imprisoned, and they have found solace in joyful memories or thoughts or small things that they could do to keep joy and their essence of humanity alive. And we learn a lot from those experiences of humans that have managed to navigate things that we can't even comprehend ourselves. So know this and seek out and try and do as much of this for yourself as you can, and try and catch moments of you actually experiencing this. And it doesn't have to be long. It might be putting your favorite song on when you have a shower. It could be singing in the car. It might be dancing in the kitchen. It could be, I tried to have a silent disco dog walk the other day. I felt quite tired when I got home. I needed to pace myself a bit more. I was like dancing too much and walking and singing. It was probably a little bit too much joy. But,
So you were dancing, singing while you're walking the dog.
yeah, it was a lot. I probably overdid the joy that day. It was really
Love
good,
it.
but yeah, I needed to lie down afterwards. But thinking about this doesn't have to be big, extravagant, these moments of joy. This can be watching the sunset. This can be watching the horses get up to their antics together and really, leaning into marveling over it all, looking at it with awe. And so, thinking about spending time with your animals or people in your riding or horsey community potentially that share your values, um, that's a place as well that you will find, I think, moments where you can connect and experience. This isn't about escaping, it is actually about being protective and nurturing and almost refueling, because there might be more advocacy to come. So we have to keep putting fuel in our tank. So things that make us laugh. It could even be watching a rom-com that we've seen 50 times. There's good neuroscience on why we find that enjoyable, and that can also top us up and refuel us too. So think about joy, think about fun, think about playfulness with relationships or play in general, board games, other things that you enjoy doing, puzzles, anything like that. I'm sure you've got lots of ideas. The other one is those positive social connections. We know, so the research on um, human happiness and longevity of life comes down to the strength and quality and enjoyment in our social relationships. So, again, this is another source of what can help us as humans. So, of course, being with people who understand what's going on for us at the moment can be really useful, because we then don't feel we have to justify or explain anything. It can also be really helpful for us. We can almost be co regulated by another person who is able to be there for us in those moments, spend time with us. They don't have to do anything really. They might just, sit and eat a pizza with us and chat and watch the fire together. But knowing intentionally that what you're doing can actually be helpful. Sometimes it can help us carve out social time and make time for it or prioritize it if we know it is actually really good for us as well, and helpful. So,
And if you're sitting here now and going, well, I don't have anyone. I live here all by myself, and I don't really have family or friends around me much, or I have some friends, but they, might not reach out. Put something, especially if you're on those social media, reach out, say, hey, does anyone feel like a chat? I'm really struggling. We're horse people. You want to talk about horses? Guarantee you will find 100 people at any moment in time that will want to talk about horses.
I
Reach
love that.
out. Just say it. Just say, like, and at the same time be mindful of how everyone is responding and wording things. And the little tiny example of that is like that there was one lady that would just copy and paste the same text on every post that went up absolutely everywhere. And I responded to her on that same reply on my post, and well, it turns out she is 71 and she is, she's got cancer and she's not well at all, and she's just trying to do how she knows how to do it, how to try and to make a change. And like, what would have been an annoying sort of commenter, or like, here she goes again, the same comment, like would have annoyed me a little bit. Now I had the communication, I found out who she is, and now I'm just like, yeah, you go for it. You go plaster that response everywhere.
I love
Just
that. It's a great example, isn't it, of reaching out with a bit of kindness and curiosity. Um, when you see something like that that goes, that's interesting. I wonder, that's a very interesting pattern. I'm curious about that. What's going on there? And finding that out.
curiosity.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, just the curiosity and going, what is your story? Why, what is going on?
And that leads beautifully into our last one here, Rylana, because, that's a sense of agency for that person. That person is feeling like they are able to do some type of action that might make a difference in their own way. And it might seem little to someone to copy and paste the same comment, but for that person, that was powerful. And that gave them a sense of feeling some level of agency that they can take in the world. And when we don't have that, or when we feel really helpless or really powerless, I was going to extend that word into I don't know where. Um, that can be really detrimental to our psychological well-being. It can almost be like it can eat away at us when we feel really helpless. So I think small actions that we might feel we can take, we might have days where we don't feel we can. We've got to build up our resources. We've got to put some investment into our joy money box and our well-being social connections. But then we might go, actually, today I feel like I could help with some fundraising, or I could write another letter to my MP. I feel like my MP might try and knock on my door one day and ask me to stop doing that, but it hasn't happened yet. But thinking about, we might share some more accurate information. Like Rylana said, there's always new information coming out. That's actually something that I have personally found really giving of agency for myself, is when I see something that really might rub me up a certain way, I kind of think, how can I create something or write something or respond to that almost in the complete opposite way with information, and not even respond to it, not even refer to it, but put this information out in the world that's a really different approach to something that I've seen that really affects me. So that can actually, I personally have found that to be a really helpful way of getting a bit of agency as well. Um, and I've seen just myself today some of the different organizations around, rescuing or fostering or different things that are happening out there. You might feel ready at some point to support in different ways as well. So I think there are some small things that we can do to help ourselves, and let's not underestimate those because they can sound really little. Sometimes I think we can dismiss them a little bit, but that can maybe be a little challenge to ourselves around finding what does make you feel joyful. How do you like to socially connect? And we're all different in terms of how much social connection we need. And then what acts of agency help you feel more powerful, or feel like you're contributing to this in a way that feels positive to you, and doing as much of or as little as you need to in that space as well. I did want to make sure, Rylana, that we were, and I said at the start that we would talk about this slide about knowing there is support out there, because I think sometimes we are really good at taking care of everyone else, and we might limp along until we actually can't limp along any longer. And I think for me, we as a society are much better at taking care of our physical health than our mental well-being. And so we might feel we're getting enough support in those other ways. We might be able to care for ourselves and have social relationships that are helping us as well. But know that there are places where we can go to have conversations at any time of the day with people that are trained, listeners and responders. And it can actually feel really amazing to have people that actually are there to hear you and to validate you, and to let you know in that moment that what you're feeling is real, and genuine. And so there's a few examples up there, like Lifeline, Beyond Blue is another one. I don't think we can underestimate the care that we can access locally too. Even being able to go to um, not urgent care if we really needed to, or emergency if we were really having a critical incident, which can sometimes happen very suddenly when we've been doing a lot of caregiving. But, reaching out, booking yourself a GP, a bit of a grease and oil change, logging with your GP what's been going on for you and actually how you have been finding things maybe tougher than usual. Um, you may have never dipped into anything like a mental health care plan, but having access to a certain number of sessions rebated with someone that is trained to support might be something at some point you would try. Um, as a therapist myself, I actually had to do 2 years of therapy while I trained as a therapist. Um, and I like to kind of say, if I, had the funds, I'd probably always do it, because once I got into that type of connection with a person that was really there for me, and I could bring whatever I needed to, that was my time. It can be a really wonderful thing, and there's I think there's not as much of that out there. So seeking that out if we need it, knowing that there are trained people out there that we can support, get support through. And on that note, I wouldn't rule out, as people that love animals and usually ergo love nature, I think sometimes we may have had experiences where we might have seen a certain type of helping professional. We might have gone, "Oh, it just wasn't the right fit for me." I don't think you can go past actually trying other types of support. And, many of you may have done this in your own health and well-being journey as well. We may have tried Western medicines, we may have tried Eastern medicines, we may have tried alternative medicines. There are lots of different types of well-being support out there as well. And so I don't think you can underestimate that. And I know finding those out locally can be really helpful. But since COVID times, there is actually more access to even some of those other therapies in more telehealth um, situations as well across Australia. You might be able to access, say, an arts therapist, for example, online, which we would have never been able to do 5 years ago. So some of those things are quite wonderful. Also, think about your community. So it doesn't always have to be formal support, it could be more informal support. Just knowing that you don't have to be experiencing this by yourself. One thing that is starting to come into Australia is something called social prescribing, and GPs are going to be able to prescribe things like um, going to art and craft sessions or connecting for pickleball in your local community. They're not quite there yet, but knowing that social prescribing is coming in Australia, I think that can help us think about some of the things we can access in our community in that way. So we might actually try and see what's happening in at our local community centre. I'm always kind of getting tempted with things in my local area, and so thinking about that as that's a legitimate way of us connecting in with people. And if you need to take it into that, connecting into peers that really understand the horse human bond and connection, as Rylana said, that might be really important for you for your support as well. So hopefully there's some ideas there if you are ready to take that step. And sometimes it can be useful for us to do that before we really, really, really need to take that step.
Yeah, don't wait too long.
No. So we've kind of come to the end for tonight, but we will also have a couple of questions if there are some, Rylana, in a moment. But I did want to kind of end with the just that the words that caring this much isn't a weakness. I would actually say it is an amazing part of our humanity to care for others and other species in the world this much. And so I think it's something we can perhaps be proud of, our capacity to care. Um, and we need more of that in the world. Kindness and compassion, I think, are some of our greatest weapons in life to create change and to be in a world that is enjoyable for all of us as well. So I think we can maybe lean into that a little bit and know that it is a bit of a superpower in its own way. So we're not trying to say tonight at all to feel less of what you're feeling, but consider together as we've talked through things tonight. Some of these ideas might help us think, how do we carry some of this a bit differently? Or how do we put things down instead of them building up to something that we're carrying that could break us a little bit? So hopefully there's been something tonight that might be useful for you to resonate with or to take away, or it might even spark something for you days or weeks down the line. So that's our hope a little bit tonight for everyone here or anyone who dips into the recording. Thank you.
Thank you so, so much for your time. Super generous and absolutely interesting. Definitely have taken away a few tips, and I guess like there is no fix, right? But it really helps to have a deeper understanding and have some strategies and knowing that you're not alone.
Absolutely. I might actually just make a stop to the recording before we have some questions.
Okay.
Um, so thank you for those who
So
have joined us for the recording.